The air over Alien Prime tasted like static and burnt ozone. From 10,000 feet up, the Zyrili capital city was a breathtaking wound. It was not a city of steel and glass, but a floating continent of bioluminescent coral, ivory white spires that pulsed with internal light, and organic archways that sang when the wind passed through them. Now, it was bleeding. Terran-packed dropships, brutal gray wedges, tore through the violet sky, spitting kinetic rounds that shattered centuries of living architecture. Return fire, golden lances of focused energy, painted the sky, seeking the ship's thermal signatures. Cade Rowan felt the Iron Will's assault shuttle buck violently as a lance of Zyrili energy grazed its shields. The light in the cabin flashed crimson, and the man next to him, a fresh-faced private, started praying. "Hey," Cade said, his voice a low gravel over the shriek of the engines. He did not look up from the plasma rifle on his lap, which was currently disassembled. "If you are going to pray, aim for specifics. God, please make Sergeant Cade fix this busted power cell before a Zyrili Centurion with those annoying arm scythes tries to board us." That's a useful prayer. The private stared at him. "You are taking your gun apart now." Cade slotted a new power cell into the rifle's housing. The diagnostic light remained a stubborn, dull red. "This piece of junk is rated for desert worlds. Out here, the air is 50% biospores and 30% righteous indignation. It clogs the intakes." He gave the rifle a solid smack with the heel of his hand. The light flickered green. He snapped the housing shut and chambered around. "There. Now it's just a piece of junk." He looked at the private, who was pale. "First drop." The private nodded. "Right," Cade said, leaning his head back against the bulkhead. "Try not to die. It's a logistical nightmare for the quartermaster, and he's already mad at me for requisitioning a non-standard issue coffee grinder." The shuttle slammed onto the landing pad, the impact rattling Cade's teeth. The hatch hissed open. "Go! Go! Go!" The squad leader yelled. Cade was not a grunt anymore. Not officially. His official title, laminated on the ID, clipped to his chest harness, read, Technical Consultant, Grade 2. It was a polite way of saying demoted. He was the guy they sent to fix the atmospheric processors when they got cranky. The man who knew the arcane secrets of the ship's nutrient vats. His presence on this assault was, technically, only to ensure the Special Ops team's high-tech breaching charges did not get gummed up by Zyrili biodefenses. He was, as he often told himself, just the repair guy with a gun. But his service file, the one nobody on the Iron Will had clearance to read, told a different story. The file was mostly thick black lines, redacting a career in a program that did not officially exist. Cade Rowan was known shipwide as a sarcastic, perpetually tired techie who somehow survived things he should not. He was durable, he was adaptable, and he hated the spotlight. He stepped on the surface of Alien Prime. The ground felt wrong. It was yielding, like hard rubber, and pulsed with a faint, deep thrum. He was walking a living thing. The squad moved fast, sticking to the shattered remnants of pearlescent walls. Command was racing for the central spire. The war was over. This was just the cleanup. The Zyrili Empress, Saris Niara, was supposedly barricaded inside. The high-ranking officers were climbing over each other for the chance to be the one to put a bullet in her. It was a fast track to a promotion, a medal, a name in the history vids. "Rowan, keep up," shouted Lieutenant Valerius, a man who clearly ironed his fatigues in the field. "And keep your eyes on those energy nodes. We get one pulse, and the breach fails." "Yes, sir," Cade said, his tone perfectly flat. He scanned the ornate archway. The Zyrili did not use wiring. They used conduits that looked like glowing veins, pulsing with the same golden energy that powered their ships and weapons. "It looks stable," Sir, but I would not advise licking it. Valerius shot him a look of pure disdain and signaled the team forward. They breached the main throne room with explosive force. The doors, which looked like hardened amber, shattered into a million pieces. The fire team flooded in, weapons sweeping the chamber. It was empty. The room was vast, a cavern of living crystals. In the center, a throne carved from a single, massive root structure sat dormant, but the target was not on the throne. Scan for life signs, Valerius ordered. Negative, sir, the comms tech replied. Too much interference, this whole place is alive. It's masking everything. Cade walked past them, his eyes on the wall behind the throne. While the officers were looking for a person, Cade was looking for technology. And in Zyrili terms, technology meant life. Sir, Cade said, pointing, you might want to look at that. Behind the throne, the wall pulsed. It was not crystal, but a semi-translucent cocoon, a defensive pod of last resort, and inside, suspended in a thick amber gel, was a figure. She was not what they expected. The propaganda videos had painted the Zyrili Empress as a withered crone, a monstrous alien queen. The woman in the pod was young, perhaps in her early 20s by human equivalent standards. Her skin was a pale, pearlescent white, and her hair was the color of spun moonlight. Even in stasis, her features were sharp, arrogant, and undeniably beautiful. Two small, elegant horns, like polished obsidian, curled back from her temples. She was Azrili royalty. This was Saris Nyara. By the stars, Valerius whispered. We got her. We got the Empress. He immediately activated his helmet cam and patched in a live feed to High Command. This is Lieutenant Valerius, Gold Team. We have eyes on the package. I repeat, package acquired. The room filled with soldiers, their heavy boots scuffing the living floor. They formed a half-circle around the pod, rifles trained on the sleeping woman. The celebration was cut short by the arrival of heavier boots. General Vorlog stormed into the throne room, flanked by two towering, power-armored bodyguards. Vorlag was a thick-necked man whose face looked like it had been carved from granite by a very angry sculptor. He headed straight for the pod, a predator's smile on his lips. Excellent work, Lieutenant, Vorlag boomed, his voice amplified by his armor. The Alliance will be very pleased. He turned to his comms officer. Patch me through to the Alliance central feed. I want everyone to see this. The end of a bloody war, delivered live. Vorlag unholstered his sidearm, a heavy caliber pistol. He checked the charge. Cade, who had been quietly observing from the back, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He knew that smile. He knew that tone. General, Valerius said, his voice suddenly nervous. Our orders were to capture, if possible. She's a high-value intelligence asset. She is a symbol. Lieutenant, Vorlag corrected, his voice dripping with condescension. And symbols are most valuable when they are martyrs. The Zyrili fought to the last man for her. Let them see what that loyalty gets them. He raised the pistol, aiming it at the center of the pod, directly at Saris's chest. The cameras were rolling across the galaxy. Billions of people were watching, ready to cheer the death of a tyrant. Cade felt the familiar bile rise in his throat. It was the smell, not the ozone, but the faint, underlying scent of lilac from the living walls. It was the same scent that had hung in the air on his homeworld, Elysia, right before the orbital bombardment began, right before Admiral Harlow Creed had ordered the tactical cleansing of his own colony to prevent Zyrili ground asset capture. He remembered the comms, the screams, the pointless sacrifice of his squadron, his family, his entire life, all for a strategic objective. It was a show then, And it was a show now, a piece of political theater, written in blood. And he was sick of it. He saw the general's finger tighten on the trigger. He saw the self-satisfied smirk. He saw the cameras broadcasting the glorious victory. Cade did not think. He reacted. The sound of Cade's plasma rifle firing was deafening in the suddenly quiet throne room. A bolt of green energy, a foot wide, struck the ceiling, shattering a massive crystal chandelier. It rained down shards of light, forcing everyone, including General Vorlag, to duck for cover. In the stunned silence that followed, every weapon, every camera, and every pair of eyes swiveled to Cade Rowan. He stood there, rifle still smoking, his expression unreadable. "Sergeant!" Vorlag roared, his face purple with rage. "What is the meaning of this? That is a court-martial offense. You just discharged your weapon at a superior officer." "No, sir," Cade said, his voice calm, almost lazy. He lowered the rifle, letting it hang from its strap. "I discharged my weapon at the ceiling, which is, unfortunately, not a superior officer. I was checking the power calibration. It seems adequate." Vorlag was speechless. Cade took a step forward, into the center of the room. He felt the weight of the moment, the live feeds, the galactic implications. He felt the cold fury in his gut, a rage he had suppressed for 3 long years. He was supposed to be the gray man, the background tech, but they had pushed him too far. "General Vorlag," Cade said, his voice carrying in the silence. "You are correct that this is a moment for history. Which is why we must observe proper protocol." Vorlag's eyes narrowed. "What protocol?" "Sergeant, the protocol where I have you shot for insubordination." "No, sir," Cade said. He tapped the side of his helmet, activating his own link to the Alliance's public legal statutes. "The protocol codified in the Terran Pact Interstellar Treaty, Article 11, Section 4, Paragraph B, the right of claim." A ripple of confusion went through the room. The soldiers looked at each other. The right of claim was an archaic, almost mythical law. It dated back to the first expansion wars, a brutal piece of legislation designed to incentivize soldiers to push into hostile territory, to take extreme risks for extreme rewards. Most thought it had been phased out. "That law is obsolete," Vorlag spat. "It is not, sir," Cade countered, his voice hardening. "It was reaffirmed in the Second Zyrili Treaty as a concession to the honor clans, and it has never been rescinded. It states," and here Cade recited, his voice flat, "that any Terran combatant present at the moment of capture of an enemy royal asset may file an immediate claim on said asset as a prize of war." He gestured to the pod. "She is a royal asset. We are the combatants present, and I am filing." The silence was absolute. Even the live feeds were probably silent, the hosts scrambling to understand what was happening. Cade Rowan looked directly at General Vorlag, then at the camera on the general's shoulder, ensuring he was speaking to the entire Galactic Alliance. "By the right of claim." "Article 11, Cade announced, his voice ringing with a sudden, terrible authority. "I claim the Empress Saris Niara as my war prize." General Vorlag's face was a mask of pure, murderous disbelief. The other soldiers looked like they had been turned to stone. And in the pod, as if sensing the shift in the room, the Empress's eyes snapped open. Her eyes were not human. They were a solid, luminous gold, without pupils or sclera. They instantly focused, not on the general with the gun, not on the soldiers, but on Cade. She stared at him. She heard his words. Her expression did not change, but her mind, a sharp, cold intellect that had ruled 10,000 worlds, began to work. This human, this enemy soldier, had just saved her life, but he had not freed her. He had claimed her. He had, in one insane, impulsive act, bound himself to her, tying himself in a knot of intergalactic political dynamite. Saris Nyara looked at the disheveled man in the mismatched armor, the man who looked more like a grease monkey than a conqueror, and she made her first assessment of him. This creature was either the most profound fool in the galaxy, or he was the most dangerous man she had ever met. "This is an outrage," Vorlag bellowed, finally finding his voice. "An absurdity. I will not allow this farce. Seize him." Two of Vorlag's power-armored guards moved toward Cade. "Be careful, sirs," Cade said, not moving a muscle. "The law is very specific. Interfering with a legal claim is an act of high treason against the Pact. I am sure the legal analysts on the broadcast are confirming it right now." Vorlag froze. He knew Cade was right. The broadcast and the billions watching. This had turned from a triumph into a circus. He looked at his comms officer, who was pale and sweating. "Sir," the officer whispered, "the feed, they are citing the law. The legal channels are confirming. It's valid. Provisionally." The word hung in the air. Provisionally. "The High Council will have to review," the officer continued. "But until they do, the claim stands." Vorlag looked like he was going to have an aneurysm. He had been robbed of his moment on live broadcast by a technician. He slowly, agonizingly, holstered his pistol. His gaze on Cade was venomous. "You have just ended your career, Rowan. If you are lucky, get her out of that pod. You claimed her. You are responsible for her." He spun on his heel. "Gold Team, we are done here. Secure the palace. Let the claimant handle his prize." The soldiers filed out, leaving Cade alone with the pod, his own stunned squad, and Lieutenant Valerius, who looked like he wanted to be sick. Cade walked over to the pod. He found the manual release, a small, organic-looking latch. "You really did it, Cade," whispered his squad mate, a woman named Rig. "You really claim to be the empress of the whole damn Zyrili Empire." "What were you thinking?" Cade paused, his hand on the latch. He looked at the woman inside, who was watching him with those unsettling, golden eyes. She was a strategic asset. She was a political time bomb, and now she was his. He had put himself at the very center of the storm he had always tried to avoid. He gave Rig a crooked, tired smirk. "I am probably getting court-martialed tomorrow," he said. He triggered the release. The pod hissed open, spilling amber gel onto the floor. But as he watched the Empress of the Zyrili Empire take her first, ragged breath of free air, the smirk faded. In his eyes, behind the exhaustion, another emotion flickered. It was the cold, hard fire of suppressed rage, the calculated glint of a man who had just found a new, terrible weapon. He had not just saved her. He had saved a lever, and he fully intended to use it to tear the whole corrupt system down, starting with the men who burned worlds and called it victory. The Iron Will was a symphony of cold, pressurized silence, a stark contrast to the living, breathing architecture of Alien Prime. The warship was a product of the Terran Pact's philosophy function, over form, gray steel over beauty, and overwhelming force over nuance. Saris Nyara was a prisoner, not in the ship's brig, but in a guest cabin near the officers' quarters. It was a sterile box with a hardened steel door that locked from the outside. The single luxury, a viewport, was polarized to opacity, denying her even a view of the stars her people had once navigated by feel. Cade Rowan. Technical consultant, and now, apparently, owner of an Empress, was her designated jailer. It was a position that amused no one, least of all him. He arrived 2 hours after the ship had made the jump to FTL, carrying a standard-issue nutrient tray. The door hissed open. Saris was sitting on the edge of the narrow bunk, her spine rigid. She had not moved since they had brought her aboard. Her pale, moonlight-colored hair was matted with drying pod gel, but her dignity was a tangible, unbreached fortress. Those solid gold eyes fixed on him. "It took you 120 minutes to bring me sustenance," she said. Her voice was crystal, melodic but sharp. "Is your species always this inefficient? Or are you uniquely deficient?" Cade set the tray on the small metal desk. "It's gray paste. It's called Nutri-Slurry. It tastes like gray paste. It will keep you alive. Don't overthink it." She looked at the tray with profound disdain. "I will require a change of garments and a cleansing unit." "You will get them," Cade said, leaning against the doorframe. He crossed his arms, trying to look bored. It was a defense mechanism. "But first, we have to establish the rules. 1. You are a prisoner. My prize. Meaning you are my problem. 2. You try to escape. You try to use any of your Xyrili magic on me or my crew. I am authorized to use force. 3. Do not talk to the guards. Do not look at the guards when they are nervous. Nervous men do stupid things." She tilted her head, slow, condescending motion. "And what of you? Technician, are you a stupid man?" "I am the stupidest man," Cade said flatly. "I am the man who claimed to be an empress in front of the entire galactic broadcast. My stupidity is legendary. But I am also the only thing standing between you and men like General Vorlog. So I suggest you be quiet, eat the paste, and try not to make my life harder." Saris finally stood, a fluid, graceful movement that seemed out of place in the cramped cabin. She was taller than him by a few inches. "You did not do it to save me, and you did not do it for glory. You did it to spite that puffed-up general. You used me, a sovereign ruler, as a tool for your petty insubordination." "That about sums it up," Cade lied. "Now eat. I have to run diagnostics." He turned to leave. "You have the hands of a laborer, technician," she said to his back. "But your eyes, they are the eyes of a calculator. You were not insubordinate. You were strategic." "Why?" Cade paused at the door. "I told you, I hate his face." He left, and the door hissed shut, the lock engaging with a heavy thud. Cade hated this. He hated the leering, the whispers, the sudden notoriety. He was escorting Saris to the medical bay 3 days later. He had argued for it, citing the need to check for internal contraband or tracking devices. It was a lie. He wanted her out of the cell for an hour to see how she reacted, and more importantly, how the crew reacted to her. She was in standard-issue gray Terran fatigues. They had forced her to wash the gel from her hair, which now fell like a white-silver cape past her waist. She looked less like a prisoner, and more like a goddess forced to wear peasant's rags. Her hands were bound in glowing, blue energy cuffs. As they rounded the corner into the main corridor, a trio of pilots was heading the other way. They stopped, their laughter dying. Their eyes went over Saris, a slow, invasive appraisal. "Well, the lead pilot, a lieutenant named Gage, drawled. "Look at the Ice Queen. Is that the war prize? Rowan?" "She's not as ugly as the vids made her out to be," another one muttered, his eyes lingering. Cade stopped, positioning himself slightly in front of Saris without looking at her. "Keep walking, Gage," Cade said, his voice a low growl. "Just admiring the view. Techie," Gage smirked. "Must be nice. Having your own royal pet. What are you going to teach her to do first?" Cade felt Saris go rigid behind him. He looked Gage dead in the eye, his expression flat and tired. "Lieutenant, last I checked, interfering with high-value assets confiscated under pact law was a court-martial offense." "And she," Cade jerked a thumb over his shoulder, "is the highest value asset in this quadrant. You smear the merchandise. You are not just answering to me. You are responding to Admiral Creed, and I hear he is very protective of his propaganda ace." Mentioning Creed and cold, legal terminology worked. Humor faded from Gage's face. He suddenly saw the political minefield he was stepping on. "Just looking," he muttered, and he and his pilots pushed past. When they were gone, Cade started walking again. "Thank you for clarifying my status as merchandise. Pet human," Sarah said, her voice dripping with ice. "You are welcome, Your Highness," Cade replied without turning. "The medical bay is this way. Try to keep up." He hated this, but not for the reason she thought. He hated the way Gage looked at her because it was the same way Vorlag had looked at her, like a thing, a trophy, a toy. And Cade Rowan, deep in his burnt-out soul, hated bullies more than he hated anything. He was fixing the ventilation in her cabin. At least, that was the story. The vent grill was open, and a mess of wires and diagnostic tools lay on the floor. Cade was shoulder-deep in the ductwork. In reality, he was planting a passive data tap in the main conduit, one that led directly to the ship's secure comms array. Saris was watching him. She had not stopped watching him for 4 days. "You are a very sloppy soldier, Cade Rowan," she observed from her bunk. "I am a technician, Your Highness. Sloppiness is part of the job description. It's how you know we are busy." "That is not what I mean. You leave digital footprints everywhere." Cade froze, his hand inside the duct. He slowly pulled his head out and looked at her. "What are you talking about? "On the floor," she said, pointing with her chin. "Real footprints. Your boots are covered in what is that yellow nutrient gel?" Cade looked down. Sure enough, a faint yellow residue was on the floor, and a matching smear was on the heel of his boot. "I told you I work on the vats. Messy job." "A lie," she said simply. "That gel is from the upper deck maintenance conduits. Section 7. Near the primary communications array. The vats are on the lower decks. Section 3. They use a blue nutrient compound." Cade slowly straightened, wiping his hand on his pants. He stared at her. "How in the hell do you know that—" "This ship is a crude metal box," she said, standing. "But it has a life support system. It has a smell, a feel. I can sense the pathways, the flow of energy. Your ship's blood. You were not in the vats. You were in the communications array for almost 3 hours. You were hacking your own ship." He said nothing. He just looked at her, his dumb grunt persona shattering like glass. "You are very observant, Your Highness." "I am an Empress, technician. Observation is survival. I ask you again. Why are you a simple technician, hacking your own warship?" Before he could answer, she pressed on, her golden eyes seeming to bore into him. "And why did you flinch when I mentioned the Elysia campaign?" Cade felt a jolt, like a physical shock. He tried to keep his face impassive. "I do not know what you are talking about." 2 nights ago," she said, "when the guards were complaining, they mentioned the war. They mentioned the victory at Elysia. You were outside my door. I felt you stop. Your breathing changed. Elysia was a Terran colony. Was it not a tactical sacrifice? Your Admiral Creed burned it to the ground to draw out our Third Fleet. A brilliant, ruthless move. It cost us the war." "War is hell," Cade said, his voice a rasp. He returned to the vent, his hands clenching. "But it was your home, was it not?" she whispered. Cade snapped. He slammed the vent grill shut with a bang that echoed in the tiny room. "What I am," he growled, "is the man who has to keep you alive. And you are a Zyrili. You are the enemy. Never mistake my actions for sympathy. You are a tool, a way to get what I want." "And what is that?" she challenged, unfazed by his outburst. "Revenge justice." "They are not the same thing, technician." "They are close enough," he said. He gathered his tools, his hands shaking. "You are not just a technician," she called after him as he left. "And you are a terrible liar." He did not have time for this. He had the connection, back in his own quarters, a cramped space that smelled like stale coffee and ozone. Cade plugged his personal data slate into the port he had jury-rigged from the stolen parts. He was in. He was not just a technician. He was a ghost. He moved through the Iron Will's mainframe with a silent, practiced ease that would have terrified the ship's cyber warfare division. He was not just looking for crew manifests. He was looking for the personal, encrypted logs of Admiral Harlow Creed. He found them, buried under 3 layers of military-grade encryption that took him 45 minutes to peel back. The file was labeled GCC Projections Osiris. It was a secure video call, dated 2 days ago. Admiral Creed's face appeared, smiling, self-satisfied. He was talking to a group of figures in a darkened boardroom. Their faces were obscured, but the insignia of the Galactic Corporate Council was visible on the wall behind them. The war profiteers. "The right of claim is a temporary nuisance," Creed said, his voice smooth. "In fact, the technician has given us a new and far more useful narrative." A shadowed figure spoke, its voice synthesized. "The markets demand stability. Admiral, a long, drawn-out peace treaty is bad for our quarterly projections. The Zyrili tinder fleets must be pacified, not negotiated with." Creed's smile widened. "Exactly. A formal execution is complicated. It invites debate. But a martyred empress, tragically killed by her rogue Terran captor while trying to escape. That is a tragedy that justifies another 5 years of pacification contracts. It justifies expanding the fleet. It justifies burning the rest of the Zyrili resistance to the ground without political oversight. And the technician Rowan, he will be our scapegoat," Creed said, his voice chillingly casual. "A decorated but unstable veteran who killed the Empress, and then, unfortunately, had to be put down by his own loyal squad. The story writes itself. The technician will be the villain. The Empress will be the corpse. Everyone wins." Cade's blood ran cold. This was not just revenge for Elysia. This was not about war. It was about business. They had burned his home, killed his family, and sacrificed thousands of lives on both sides, all for a stock ticker. The anger was so cold and so vast it almost choked him. He had his mission. He had to keep Ceres alive, not just to spite Creed, but to use her as a witness. He had to get her off this ship. He was agitated. He was pacing his quarters. He was trying to formulate a plan. He needed to get back to Ceres, to warn her, so he did not know what. He grabbed a datapad, loaded with approved Terran propaganda and history texts, the only thing the captain had approved for the prisoner. He stormed back to her cabin. She was waiting, as if she knew he would return. She was wearing the gray fatigues, and she looked at her own arms with a frown. "Your pet human has terrible fashion," she remarked as he entered, her voice dry. "This fabric is an insult. It chafes." "Just read the damn pad, Your Highness," Cade snapped, throwing it on her bunk. I am busy. She saw his agitation immediately. You found what you were looking for, did not you, technician? Your face has the pallor of a man who just looked into the void. The void, Cade scoffed, his mind racing, trying to find a way out, is just an absence of matter. This is worse. This is an absence of decency. He was pacing the tiny room now. They are not even lying well. The entire strategy is flawed. They want to prolong the war, but they are using a full conquest metric. The numbers do not add up. It is a classic asymmetrical objective failure. They are optimizing for the wrong outcome. He stopped dead. Words hung in the air, cold and precise. Saris was bolt upright on her bunk. Her golden eyes were no longer condescending. They were sharp, laser-focused. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I said they are stupid." Cade deflected, his heart hammering. No. Before that, the phrase, asymmetrical objective failure. That is not a term a grunt uses. That is not in any public manual. She stood up, her full height seeming to dominate the room. That is doctrinal language. It is specifically terminology from the Aurora grid protocols. It is the anchor language. Cade felt the blood drain from his face. He tried to force a laugh, but it came out as a strangled cough. Anchor, like a boat, I read a lot. Your Highness, you pick things up. Do not insult me, human, she hissed, taking a step toward him. The energy cuffs sparked slightly. I am Zyrili. We are a biotechnical civilization. My ancestors built cities that sing. I know what a node feels like. I know what a processor feels like. I could sense something broken in you from the moment I woke up in that pod. A scar. A connection that was violently severed. She was inches from him now, her golden eyes scanning his face. You are one of them. Aren't you? You are an anchor. His denial died in his throat. He saw it, just for a second. In his mind's eye, the interface, the cold rush of pure data, the godlike perspective of the Aurora grid, the strategic supersystem that ran the Terran war machine, and he remembered the day it presented him with the optimal solution for the Elysia sector tactical cleansing. He remembered the screams of the data ghosts as he tore the connection from his own mind. A feedback loop that nearly killed him and left him as unstable in his file. You do not know what you are talking about, he said, his voice weak. I know exactly what I am talking about, she whispered. There is a reason you hate your admiral, and it is the same reason you are terrified of me finding out who you truly are. Whoop! 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 The ship's priority channel alert blared, cutting her off. It was not a combat alarm. It was an executive order. The voice of the Iron Will's captain, a loyal Creed man, boomed over the intercom. All hands, new orders from Pack Command. We are diverting from our rendezvous at Base Epsilon. We are ordered to proceed immediately, at maximum warp, to Heliarch Spire. The Alliance Senate has convened an emergency session to determine the fate of the Zyrili prisoner. Cade and Saris stood frozen, inches apart. The accusation hung between them, unanswered, but now confirmed. Heliarch Spire, Saris said, her voice a low murmur. That is the center of your political web, is it not? It is where the spiders live, Cade replied, his mind already racing, calculating, planning. They had made a mistake. They thought he was a broken grunt. They had forgotten what he was. They will kill me there, she stated. It was not a question. That is the plan, Cade said, his gaze drifting up to the ventilation grill on the ceiling. He knew the ductwork. He knew the ship's schematics because he had once been linked to the AI that designed them. He knew where the shuttles were. "They are going to make a show of it." She looked at him. The Empress and the broken anchor, locked in a steel box. "And you, my owner." "Will you let them?" Cade looked back at her. The just a grunt mask was gone. In its place was something cold, precise, and far more dangerous. "I do not like shows," Cade Rowan said. "And I especially do not like the director. Get some rest, Your Highness. It is going to be a busy few days." The Iron Will was a hive of controlled chaos. Cade had initiated his plan with a simple, untraceable cascade failure in the aft life support systems. He did not blow anything up. He simply fixed a diagnostic sensor until it reported a fatal biocontaminant in the air scrubbers for Deck 10. Deck 10 was where Saris was being held. The captain, a nervous man named Elias, had no choice. Protocol dictated that a high-value biological asset must be evacuated from a potential contamination zone. Cade, as the on-site technician, and, more importantly, her legal claimant, was ordered to move her. "Where are you taking me?" Saris asked, her voice low as Cade strapped her into the transport gurney. The energy cuffs were still on her wrists, but he had left them on a low, non-chafing setting. "You are being transferred, Your Highness," Cade said. His voice all business for the two guards at the door. "Plague simulation. We are moving you to a clean shuttle." His plan was simple. He would get her to the auxiliary shuttle bay, the one used for diplomatic pods and high-speed couriers. He would get her onto the shuttle, tell the guards he needed to run a diagnostic, and lock the door. From there, he would fake a launch system malfunction, jettison the pod, and escape the Iron Will. Creed's narrative of an unstable veteran snapping would be half true. Cade would be a traitor, but they would be free. They were in the main artery corridor, halfway to the shuttle bay. When the ship screamed, it was not a sound, but a vibration, a deep, bone-shuddering groan of metal under stress. The lights did not flash red. They went out entirely, plunging the corridor into emergency blue lighting. "What did you do?" Saris hissed from the gurney. "This is not me," Cade yelled. He drew his sidearm. The guards were already on their comms, shouting, "Red alert! Red alert! All hands, brace for impact. We are under attack." The ship surged violently to port, throwing them against the bulkhead. One of the guards was crushed by a dislodged support strut. The other raised his rifle. "Who is attacking us?" Cade shouted. "Does it matter?" Saris countered. "Get these restraints off me." A section of the hull, 20 yards down the corridor, exploded inward, sucking air, debris. And the second guard into the void of warp space. A containment field snapped into place, but not before they saw it the enemy ship. It was black, sleek, and wrong. It had the angular, brutalist hardpoints of a Terran destroyer. But the skin of the ship was an iridescent, organic-looking material that seemed to heal itself. "That is not your technology," Saris said, her golden eyes wide. "It is not yours either," Cade said, his mind racing. Hybrid tech. He blasted the straps on her gurney with his pistol. "Forget the plan. We are improvising." "My favorite kind of human," she muttered, rubbing her wrists as she stood. Another blast rocked the ship. The corridor began to buckle. "This way, to the shuttle bay." Now Cade grabbed her arm. They ran. They were not jailers and prisoners. They were just two people trying to outrun a collapsing ceiling. The auxiliary shuttle bay was chaotic. Alarms blared. Officers were scrambling for the armored life pods, ignoring the diplomatic shuttle Cade had been aiming for. "Get in," he yelled, shoving her toward the sleek, unarmed courier pod. He slammed his hand on the console, initiating the launch sequence. "This is an escape pod," Saris yelled over the noise. "It has no weapons, no warp drive. It is fast, and it is the only one they are not fighting for." Cade yelled back. He was inside, sealing the hatch as the Iron Will's main reactor took another hit. "Hold on." The shuttle was blasted from the bay. A tiny seed spat from a dying giant. Cade watched the tactical display as the Iron Will, heavily damaged, made an emergency FTL jump, vanishing in a flash of blue light, leaving them alone. "Well," Cade breathed, "we are free." "You are a fool," Saris said, pointing at the display. "They are still here, and they see us." One of the hybrid ships, a small fighter, turned toward them. "Sensors are offline," Cade said, strapping himself into the pilot's seat, his knuckles white. "Engine response is sluggish. This thing is not built for combat." "Then you had best be a creative pilot," she said. A lance of energy, the same golden color as the Relay tech, but fired with the sharp, kinetic force of a Terran railgun, struck the shuttle's aft. The console exploded in sparks. "Shields gone. We are hit," Cade yelled, fighting the controls. "Cade," Saris shouted, her voice tight with real fear for the first time. She was pointing at the main viewport. It was filled with green. A vast, swirling, cloud-covered planet. "Haloreach. Atmospheric entry is not going to be gentle," Cade grunted, pulling on the yoke. "Brace yourself. This is going to hurt." The world tore them from the sky. The shuttle screamed through the atmosphere, a meteor of burning metal. Cade fought to keep the nose, but the controls were dead. He saw the canopy of a massive forest rushing up to meet them. "This," he muttered, "is definitely going to be a problem for the quartermaster." The impact was a symphony of destruction. Cade woke to silence, broken only by a high-pitched electrical whine and the drip, drip, drip of water. His head felt like it had been split in two. He tasted copper. He unbuckled, falling out of the pilot's seat onto the slanted floor of the cabin. The shuttle was nose down in a swamp, wrapped in the grip of massive, fungal-encrusted trees. The cockpit was shattered, open to the alien air. "Saris," he croaked. "I am unharmed, technician." Her voice came from the back. It was strained. "Which is more than I can say for your piloting skills. I believe you have set a new record for incompetence." He crawled back to her. She was wedged between two cargo containers, but she was standing, her golden eyes already scanning the jungle outside. "Comms are dead," Cade said, checking his wrist comp. "Navigation is fried. Long-range sensors are a puddle of slag." He pulled his plasma rifle from its emergency locker. It was intact. "We have one rifle, a standard survival pack, a medkit, and half a charge on my sidearm. We are, in technical terms, royally screwed." "We are alive," she corrected, pushing a strand of white hair from her face. "That is a starting point." He found a plasma torch in the survival kit and sliced through her energy cuffs. The blue light died. She rubbed her wrists, her gaze never leaving the jungle. "Do not make me regret that," Cade said. "If I were going to kill you, technician, I would have done it while you were drooling on the console." "Fair point." He slung the rifle. "We have to move. The crash will attract visitors, and I am guessing they do not sell cookies." The air on Haloreach was thick, wet, and smelled of chlorophyll and decay. It was a world of green, 1,000 shades of it, from the dark, oily leaves on the ground to the luminous, acid green moss that hung from trees a mile high. The air was so humid it was almost liquid. Cade led the way, relying on his basic training. He set a compass point south, hoping to find higher ground for a signal. For 2 hours, Saris followed in silence. Cade was a professional. He moved quietly, testing the ground, his eyes scanning the canopy, his rifle at the ready. He stopped, holding up a hand. His wrist comp, running on its last dregs of battery, was pinging. A faint biosign. "What is it?" Saris whispered. "Movement. Up ahead. Big," Cade whispered back. "We go right. Around it." "No," Saris said, her voice firm. Cade turned. "What do you mean?" "No, I have a sensor. It says big and hungry is that way. The sensor is a machine. It hears the noise. I hear the song," she said. She closed her eyes. "The ground to the right is wrong. It is waiting. It is hollow. We go left." "Your Highness, with all due respect. I am the one with the gun and the training. We go right." He started to move. Saris did not follow. He stopped, exasperated. "Look, we do not have time for this." "Go on, human," she said, her eyes still closed. "Trust your machine. I will trust the world." Cade gritted his teeth. He did not know if this was an alien power play or if she was serious. He looked right. It looked identical to the left. "Fine." He picked up a rock, the size of his fist, and hurled it as hard as he could onto the path to the right. It landed with a wet thud. For a second, nothing. Then the ground erupted. A mass of barbed, black tendrils, each as thick as his arm, shot up from the mud, seizing the rock and pulling it under. The ground closed as if nothing had happened. Cade stared, his mouth dry. Saris opened her eyes. "As I said, left." Cade just nodded. "Left it is." They walked for another 6 hours, Cade handling the tactical and Saris handling the environment. He found a stream. She used a bioluminescent plant to taste the water, declaring it safe. He set up a plasma-based tripwire. She calmed a pack of small, six-eyed creatures that looked like rabid monkeys, convincing them to leave without a sound. "How?" Cade asked, baffled, as he packed up the unused tripwire. "Everything on your worlds is dead, technician," she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "Steel, plastic, recycled air. You are all deaf and blind, shouting at each other in the dark. This world is alive. It is a single, vast entity. You just have to listen." "All I hear is bugs," Cade grumbled, but he was watching her with a new, grudging respect. They found shelter as the triple moons of Halloreach began to rise, bathing the jungle in a ghostly, silver light. It was a cave, dry and deep, set into a cliff face. "This is it," Cade said. "We rest here. I will take my first watch." He was sweeping the interior of the cave with the light from his rifle when he saw the glint. "Saris, get back, slowly," he said. "What is it? We are not the first ones here." In the back of the cave, something unfurled. It rose from a pile of what Cade thought were shadows. It was 8 feet tall, a nightmare of obsidian carapace and hooked claws. It had 6 legs, 2 of which were razor-sharp scythes, and a head that was just a cluster of glowing, red eyes. It let out a chittering hiss that vibrated in Cade's chest. "A hallow stalker," Saris breathed, her voice tight with terror. "We are dead. Get behind me," Cade yelled, shoving her back. He opened fire. The plasma bolt struck the creature's chest and splashed, sizzling off the near-impenetrable armor. The stalker was annoyed, not harmed. It lunged. Cade did not have time to think. He did not have time to aim. He only had time to react. His human reflexes were too slow. The rifle was useless. He was dead. Saris was dead. Creed would win. No. The thought was a spike of pure, cold defiance. I am not dying here. He did not call for it. He did not ask. He opened the firewall in his mind, the one he had spent 3 years building, and let the ghost in. The world dissolved. The cave, the creature. Saris, they all vanished, replaced by a wireframe schematic rendered in cold, blue light. The world no longer mattered. It was data, the stalker, now just a red-line threat vector, was moving. Attack velocity 45 ms. Vector 0.01. Target thorax. Cade's mind, his mind was screaming in terror. But the other part, the cold, silent anchor logic, simply processed. Threat terminal. Evasion 14.8%, probability of success. Counter 31.2%, probability. The stalker's scythe arm came down. Cade did not dodge. He moved with a precision that was not human. He shifted his weight 1 inch to the left, letting the claw pass so close it sheared off a piece of his shoulder armor. He was inside the creature's guard. The UI highlighted a spot, a micro fissure beneath the armpit where the carapace was thinner. Vulnerability 98.7%. Cade did not use his rifle as a gun. He used it as a tool. He jammed the barrel into the fissure, his combat knife in his other hand, and stabbed upward into the hilt of the blade. Vector 0.0.0, perfect. He pulled the trigger, the plasma charge, with nowhere to go, exploded inside the creature's body. The stalker screamed a sound that was half shriek, half electrical discharge, and its head exploded, showering the cave in blue-black ichor. The massive body collapsed, twitching, just inches from his feet. Cade stood there, panting, his entire body shaking from the adrenaline and the strain of the neural link. The blue UI flickered in his vision, threat neutralized, and then faded, leaving him in the dark, torchlit cave. He felt sick. He turned. Saris was pressed against the wall, her hand over her mouth. Her golden eyes were wide, not with fear of the beast, but with fear of him. She was staring at his face. "Your eyes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What about them?" he rasped. They were glowing. Blue. They were full of light, full of data. She took a ragged breath. "You are not just a technician. You are not just a soldier. You are a human node, an anchor." I was right. The secret was out. He was too tired to lie. He just nodded, sliding down the cave wall, the rifle clattering from his numb fingers. They sat by the fire Cade had built. The carcass of the stalker outside the cave was a grim, but effective, deterrent. The triple moons cast a pale light over the humid jungle. For a long time, there was only the sound of the alien insects and the crackle of the fire. "Tell me," Saris finally said. Her voice was no longer imperious, just tired. "I have seen what you are. Now tell me why." Cade stared into the flames. The anger he had held for 3 years felt distant, replaced by a profound exhaustion. "They called us anchors," he said, his voice flat. "The Aurora grid is not just an AI. It is a strategic entity. It is too big, too complex for any quantum computer. It needed an intuitive processor. Something that could feel, could guess, could create. It needed a human mind as a living coprocessor." He picked up a stick, tracing lines in the dirt. "We were the hardware. We were linked. I could see everything. The entire war, from a god's eye view. Every ship, every troop movement, every supply line. And I could optimize it." The stick snapped in his hand. "Then came Elysia, my home. Your fleet was on its way. The grid presented the optimal solution to trap and destroy your third fleet. A tactical cleansing. Burn the planet, create a firewall, and blame it on you." "We saw the reports," Saris whispered. We thought your command was monstrous." It was, Cade said, his voice thick. It was a machine. It said the loss of 8 million civilians was acceptable, to ensure a 99.9% probability of victory. I was in the command seat. I saw the data. My family was in the city. The grid listed them as collateral. He was silent for a minute. I argued. I tried to find another solution. But the grid just kept saying optimal. So I broke it. I broke myself. I used my connection to inject a logic virus, a memory file. I gave it my grief. I forced it to feel what it was doing. The feedback loop was catastrophic. It fried my neural port, killed 2 other anchors on the network, and left me. He tapped his temple. They could not execute me. I knew too much, so they labeled me unstable, damaged goods, and buried me as a technician. They took away my godhood and gave me a wrench, and I was grateful. He finally looked at her, his eyes reflecting the fire. That is my revenge, Ceres. It is not just Creed. It is the whole damn system. The machine that turns 8 million lives into a rounding error. That is what I am going to burn to the ground. Ceres watched him, her golden eyes unblinking. She saw the man, not the anchor. She saw the pain, not the soldier. Your machine is not so different from my counsel, she said softly. Cade looked up. The war lasted for 50 years, she said, her own voice hollow. Why our technology is superior. We could have broken you, or you could have overwhelmed us with numbers, but it lasted. Because on both sides, there were those who needed it to. My counsel there were factions. They made secret deals with your corporations. They sold us, piece by piece. They sacrificed fringe worlds, worlds deemed unworthy. They let your fleets burn them, in exchange for stability at the core. They prolonged the war to keep their power, and your corporations prolonged it for profit. They stared at each other, the human anchor and the Zyrili Empress, 2 victims of the same vast, monstrous lie. The silence was broken by a chirp. Cade's datapad, which he had been trying to fix, flared to life. It had caught a signal. A face appeared on the cracked screen. It was Admiral Harlow Creed. His face was grim, a mask of false sorrow, broadcast on every channel in the galaxy. It is with a heavy heart, Creed said, that I must report the loss of the warship Iron Will, destroyed with all hands by a Zyrili splinter faction. But worse, the traitor, Sergeant Cade Rowan, unstable and dangerous, has abducted the Empress Ceres Nyara. His escape pod was seen fleeing the battle. He is to be considered an enemy of the Pact. Shoot on sight, Cade just laughed. A bitter, harsh sound. He is good. He cleaned it all up in one broadcast. I am a traitor. You are a kidnap victim. And the Iron Will is lost, conveniently silencing any witnesses. He has made you the enemy of your people, Ceres murmured. But the pad, Cade frowned. It did not just catch that broadcast. It is getting a repeating signal. Something local. And old. They followed the signal for a mile, to a ridge overlooking a valley. There, hidden by the jungle, was a structure. It was not Terran. It was not Zyrili. It was built from seamless, black obsidian, and it hummed with a power that made Cade's teeth ache. The massive door opened at their approach. Inside was a vault. A holographic display lit up as they entered. It was history. A race history they had never heard of. The first ones. And it showed 2 AIs. 2 beautiful, swirling matrices of light. One blue, one gold. That is the Aurora grid, Cade whispered, pointing to the blue one. And that, Ceres said, pointing to the gold one, is the Zephyr lattice, the mind of the Zyrili, our great guiding psionic network. The hologram played on. It showed the AIs were designed together, as partners. A system of pure logic, Aurora, balanced by a system of pure intuition, Zephyr. They were created to manage resources, guide development, and prevent war. Then the hologram shifted. It showed two new races. Primitive, just finding their way to the stars, humans, and Zyrili. It showed leaders from both sides, in secret, stealing the AIs, separating them, corrupting them. Each side took one, forking the code, twisting it from a shield into a sword. They were not our creations, Cade said, his mind reeling. They were our inheritance, and we broke them. Our entire war, Sarah said, her voice a razor's edge. Our entire identity is based on a stolen, broken lie. Cade looked at the display, then Saris. The weight of what they had just learned settled on them. We are not just surviving this planet. Are we? Cade said. It was not a question. No, Saris replied, her golden eyes hardening, the Empress returning. If we die here, the lie wins. Cade picked up his rifle. A new, terrible purpose in his eyes. Right, he said, returning to the jungle. Then we are not just surviving. We are getting off this rock. And we are going to broadcast this to the entire damned galaxy. The vault on Hollow Reach was not just a library. It was a key. In the center of the chamber, the holographic display of the 2-as-1 AI's Aurora and Zephyr shimmered. Cade, his hands still covered in the stalker's black ichor, worked on the obsidian console. This is not a control panel, he muttered, his fingers tracing the seamless, non-Euclidean angles. It is a lock. Then open it, Sarah said. She stood behind him, her arms crossed, the Empress again. The shared trauma of their new knowledge had forged a cold, brittle alliance. It does not want a password, Cade said. It wants a resonance, a Zyrili and human at the same time key. He looked at her. Your turn, Your Highness. Do your listening thing, Sarah sighed, a sound of profound weariness. You are an articulate savage, technician. She stepped up to the console, placing her pale hand next to his. She closed her golden eyes. Cade watched, fascinated, where he saw inert, alien stone. She saw something else. Her breathing deepened. The air in the vault grew thick, static crackling in Cade's ears. He felt the ghost of his anchor connection itch at the back of his skull, responding to her. It is a transport, she whispered, her eyes still closed. A gateway. It is dormant, but it wants to connect. It is pointing somewhere. Where? A place of shadows, she murmured. A reach. A cloud. Hidden. Safe. That is great. How do we turn it on? It requires two-factor authentication, she said, her voice strained. Logic in life. It needs your mind, and mine. Your connection to the anchor scar, and my biosignature. Together. Just tell me what to do, Cade said. Place your hand on the panel. And when I tell you what to think, Cade put his hand on the cold stone. Think about why we are doing this, she said. Think about the lie. She took a deep breath. Now, Cade closed his eyes. He let the rage in, the cold, precise fury he felt when he saw Creed's message, the burning grief of Elysia, the hot shame of a war built on corporate greed. He focused on it all, not as an emotion, but as a fact, a data point. He felt Saris's psionic presence, not as an invasion, but as a parallel force. She was doing the same, focusing her own royal grief, her own people's betrayal, into a single point of light, logic and life blue, and gold. The black obsidian console flashed, once, with a brilliant white light. The walls of the vault dissolved. The jungle, the planet, the universe seemed to twist, fold, and turn inside out. It was not like FTL. It was not a jump. It was a step sideways. Then, silence. The white light faded, replaced by a deep, soft amethyst. Cade stumbled, his stomach lurching. The air was different, cold, recycled, with the scent of incense and ozone. They were no longer in the vault. They were on a metal platform in a vast, cavernous hangar. The space was filled with ships, sleek, bioluminescent Zyrili cruisers, looking like deep-sea creatures, were moored next to scarred, blocky Terran frigates. Monks in Zyrili robes hurried past Terran engineers in greasy coveralls. They were in Eidolon Reach, a hidden base, floating in the heart of a purple nebula. "By the stars," Cade whispered. "It is a refugee camp." A shout echoed across the hangar. "It is her, it is the Empress." Within seconds, they were surrounded. Zyrili soldiers, their faces gaunt but fierce, dropped to one knee. Terran defectors, men and women who had seen too much, just stared, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. "My Empress," a deep voice boomed. A Zyrili warrior, ancient and massive, pushed through the crowd. He was clad in armor of deep crimson, and his face was a network of ritual scars. "You are alive. The lattice sang of your return, but we did not dare. We thought you were a ghost." He rose, and his gaze fell on Cade. The warmth in the old warrior's eyes turned to absolute ice. "Empress," the general said, his voice a low growl. "Why have you brought this human filth into our sanctuary? Why have you brought a butcher?" Cade felt a dozen bio-rifles in his head. "Stand down, General Theron," Saris commanded. Her voice had changed. It was no longer the sharp tone of a prisoner, but the full, resonant authority of a monarch. "He is not a prisoner." "He is under my protection. He is the reason I am alive." "He is the reason your worlds are dead," Theron roared. "He is one of the monsters who burned Kythos, butchers, using AIs to calculate their atrocities. He will die." "I said," Saris repeated, stepping in front of Cade. "Stand down!" The authority in her voice was a physical force. The soldiers flinched. General Theron ground his teeth, but he, too, lowered his gaze. "As you command, my Empress, for now." He turned to Cade. "We will be speaking again, human, once the Empress is cleansed of your taint." The council was held in the sanctum. It was the core of the base, a chamber that hummed with latent power. In the center, a dormant crystal lattice, a smaller, fractured cousin of the Grand Zephyr lattice, pulsed with a faint golden light. Saris sat at the head of a long, stone table. Cade, standing at her right shoulder. He was the only human in a room full of furious, grieving Zyrili commanders and a few nervous-looking Terran officers. General Theron sat at the far end, his arms crossed, radiating menace. "It is a lie," Theron said, slamming his fist on the table after Saris and Cade explained what they had found in the vault. "A Terran trick, a poison whispered by this anchor to confuse you. My Empress, humans are monsters. The only answer is to purge them. We will use your return as a symbol, a holy banner. We will rally the splinter fleets, and we will burn their homeworld." A chorus of approval rose from the purest faction. "And you will fail," Cade said, his voice quiet. Theron's head snapped toward him. "What did you say? Human?" "I said you will fail," Cade repeated, stepping forward. "You will fail because you are fighting the wrong enemy. You are fighting soldiers who are just as lied to as you are. You are not fighting for real power. And you know this power, human anchor. Theron sneered. I do, Cade said. And so do you, General. He turned to Saris. We cannot tell them. We have to show them. The vault data is the key. This place, he gestured to the crystal lattice. This is the lock. This is a backup of your Zephyr lattice. Isn't it an uncorrupted pre-war version? A Xyrili scholar nodded. It is. From the first era. It is a holy relic. It is a computer, Cade said, earning him a growl from Theron. And I can use it. I can use the vault key to bridge my anchor connection to your lattice. And together, we can search the deep net for the original, uncorrupted files. The proof. Abomination, Theron shouted. Would you let him touch the sacred lattice, Empress? Forbid this. Saris looked at the angry faces. She looked at the desperate, hopeful ones. Then she looked at Cade. She saw the certainty in his eyes. Do it, she said. The process was agony. Cade was strapped into a Terran diagnostic chair, wires running from his temples to the Xyrili console. Saris stood at the lattice itself, her hands pressed against the main crystal, acting as the psionic bridge, the interpreter between his human anchor mind and the alien Xyrili system. This is going to hurt, Cade muttered, his head already pounding. War is a pain. Technician, Saris said, her voice tight. Focus. He closed his eyes and pushed. He did not just connect. He dove. He fell through the golden, singing data stream of the Zephyr lattice. A logic bomb in a sea of intuition. The Xyrili AI screamed at his presence, a sound of pure, psychic revulsion. Foreign logic. Node detected purge. Ceres, now. Cade grunted, the psychic pressure threatening to crack his skull. He felt her mind join his. She did not fight the lattice. She soothed it, presenting the vault's key code not as a weapon, but as an answer, a piece of a long-lost puzzle. The screaming stopped. The lattice hesitated. It listened. Cade punched in the final coordinates. Search. Cross-reference. Aurora grid. Zephyr lattice. Transaction. Logs. War profit. Mutual sacrifice. The galaxy's darkest secrets opened to him. It was not just corruption. It was collaboration. Bring it up, Cade gasped. On the main screen. All of it. The holographic display in the council chamber lit up. It showed a transaction log, cold and blue. Transaction. 994A. Approval. Admiral H. Creed Aurora. Approval unknown Zephyr. Action. CD Xyrili World. Kythos to TPACT Corporate Forces. Exchange halt. TPACT advance into Omega Sector. A murmur of horror went through the room. They had been told Kythos was a glorious last stand. It was a trade. It is a lie, Theron whispered, his face pale. Oh, we are just getting started. General, Cade said, his voice dripping with venom. Saris, search for the Silesia. Sector 7. A new log appeared. This one was golden. Transaction. 451B. Approval unknown Aurora. Approval General Theron Zephyr. Action allow TPACT. Tactical cleansing of Terran world Elysia. Exchange rerouting of Xyrili Third Fleet to avoid engagement. Preservation of purest forces. The room was silent. Cade turned, his entire body shaking, and looked at General Theron. The old warrior was not just pale. He was broken. He was staring at the log, his own authorization, his own treason, displayed for all to see. You, Cade began, his voice a low, murderous growl. You knew. You let my world burn. You let my family burn. It was you. It was a sacrifice, Theron roared, rising from his chair, his face a mask of desperate justification. A necessary sacrifice your world for my fleet, to preserve the purity of the Xyrili race, to fight the real war. You did not preserve anything, Cade roared back, ripping the wires from his head. You just fed the machine, both of you, Creed. You corporations, shadow councils. You are the same damn monster. He turned to the stunned council. You see, Creed is not the enemy. Theron is not the enemy. Not the real one. They are just puppets. They are the mask for the real power, a joint shadow council of Terran and Zyrili elites who are managing this war like a corporate asset. They are using both our AIs as a joint checking account to balance their books, paid in blood. He was pacing, his mind on fire, the anchor logic flowing through him once more, but this time, it was his. You cannot win this by fighting fleets, General. You will just be eliminating their competition. You cannot win by killing Creed. They will just promote another monster. He slammed his hand on the console. A new image appeared, a brilliant, orbiting city of white and gold. Sol Crown, Cade said. Earth's orbital command, the heart of the pact. And, in 2 days, the host of Admiral Creed's Peace Summit. A PR stunt to solidify his power and accept the Zyrili surrender. You want to attack Earth? A Terran officer asked, horrified. That is suicide. We are not attacking, Cade said, a wild, dangerous glint in his eyes. We are infiltrating. We are not going to hit a single military target. We are going to hit the broadcast array. We are going to take these logs. He pointed to the screen. And we are going to plug Ceres, the Zephyr lattice, and the truth from that vault right into the galactic mainframe. We are going to show everyone, every Terran civilian, every Zyrili splinter fleet who their real enemy is. He locked eyes with Ceres. We do not smash the snakes' heads one by one. We smash the nest. The plan was insane. It was brilliant. General Theron, however, was a zealot. And a broken zealot is the most dangerous kind. He saw his world, his honor, his entire life's purpose revealed as a sham. He will betray you, Empress, Theron whispered, his hand drifting to the biopistol at his hip. It is a human trick. He will lead you to Sol Crown and hand you to his masters. The general drew his weapon, aiming it at Cade. I will not let him. I will die a purist. Before Cade could react, Ceres moved. She was a blur of white and silver, stepping directly into the line of fire, her hand closing over the barrel of Theron's pistol. The energy charge sizzled against her palm, but she did not flinch. No, General, she said, her voice so cold it burned. You will not die a purist. You will live as a traitor, or you will find redemption. But I am your Empress, and I am done with your cycles of violence. She looked from Theron's broken, hateful face to Cade's. If he betrays us, General, I swear on the First Era I will be the one to kill him. Personally. Theron's arm trembled. He looked at his Empress, and for the first time, he saw a true ruler, not just a symbol. He slowly, agonizingly, lowered his weapon. Cade let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He walked past Ceres, patting her on the shoulder. That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, he whispered, for her ears only. He thought he saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Do not get sentimental, technician. It is still a long way to Earth. Later, Cade stood alone in the hangar, looking at the hybrid stealth ship they were prepping. It was a chimera of tech. Fast, quiet, and probably unstable. He felt a hand on his arm. It was Ceres. You are shaking, she said. I am fine, he lied. He was staring at the star chart, at the bright dot marked Sol. I still want to kill him, you know, Creed. After all this, the data, the logs, I still just want to put a bullet in his head for Elysia. For my family. I know, she said. I still want to burn every Terran world that celebrates our fall. The feeling does not make you a monster. Cade. He looked at her, surprised she had used his name. It is what you do with the feeling that defines you, she continued. Your humanity is not your rage, as you believe. It is your stubbornness, your refusal to be logical. Your machine told you to accept 8 million deaths. You refused. You chose grief. That is what broke your connection, and that is what makes you the only person in the galaxy who can fight this. He was silent. He had always seen his broken anchor connection as a weakness, a failure. She saw it as a weapon. I cannot do this with half a mind, he said, finally admitting it. To get into Sol Crown, to fight Aurora on its home turf. I need to be an anchor again. A real one. It will destroy you, she said, her voice soft. Not if I am not alone, he said. He nodded toward the sanctum. That uncorrupted sliver of Aurora's code, the partner code. I need you to help me link it. Not as a slave, not as hardware. As a partner, like it was meant to be. It was the greatest risk. Reopening the wound that had nearly killed him. Saris studied his face, her golden eyes searching for him. You trust me not to be a monster. I trust you not to become one. She held out her hand. Let us go rearm our technician. They prepped for launch. The plan was set. The stealth ship's transponder was programmed with a Xyreeli diplomatic code. General Theron, humbled and seeking penance, was coordinating the splinter fleets to support them, to be ready to act on the broadcast, not to attack. The cover story was perfect in its arrogance. Cade Rowan, the infamous traitor, had been recaptured by a Xyreeli loyalist cell, eager to curry favor with the new victor of the war. They were traveling to Sol Crown to personally deliver both Cade Rowan, for execution, and the Empress Saris Nyara as a trophy of peace to Admiral Creed himself, live at his glorious summit. He will not be able to resist, Cade said, strapping into the pilot's seat of the stealth ship. He felt the new, old connection in his head. The blue light of Aurora's original code was there, but it was quiet. It was not a master. It was a co-pilot. Saris strapped in next to him. His ego is his greatest weakness. No, Cade said. As the engines hummed to life, the nebula's purple light washing over the cockpit. It is his second greatest. I am his first. The ship slipped out of Eidolon reach, cloaked, and set a course for the heart of the Terran Pact. Sol Crown was the jewel of the Terran Pact, a pristine, spinning wheel of white gold and sapphire blue habitat domes, orbiting the cradle of humanity. It was the physical manifestation of the Pact's victory orderly, beautiful, rich, and utterly sterile. It was a city designed to be seen, a backdrop for political theater. And today was the premiere. The hybrid stealth fighter, its transponder squawking the high-priority diplomatic code Cade had sliced from a Xyreeli archive, was given a full honor guard escort. 2 of the Pact's newest model destroyers, all sharp angles and gleaming gunmetal, guided them into the central docking bay of the Council Tower. The narrative Creed's administration had swallowed, the one Cade had so generously fed them, was perfect. It appealed to the Admiral's boundless ego. The traitor, Cade Rowan, had not escaped. No. He had been recaptured by a Xyreeli warlord, a hardliner named Theron, who, upon hearing of Creed's glorious victory, was now coming to Sol Crown to personally surrender. And as a gift, a tribute to the new human dominance. He was bringing both the traitor Rowan for public execution and the Empress Saris Nyara as a permanent war prize. Creed, Cade knew, would not be able to resist a single, televised event that combined a surrender, an execution, and a trophy presentation. It was the ultimate propaganda coup. The ramp hissed open. The air was perfectly temperature-controlled, with a faint, antiseptic smell. A full detachment of Creed's personal honor guard soldiers in dress black armor, with mirrored faceplates, formed a rigid, intimidating corridor. Cade stepped out first. He wore battered, ill-fitting combat fatigues, his hands bound in heavy-looking but ultimately non-functional magnetic cuffs. He kept his head down, playing the part of the broken, defeated soldier. Saris followed. She was clad in a simple, shimmering white Zyrili gown, a garment that implied both royalty and submission. Her hands were also bound, and her face was a perfect mask of cold, haughty resignation. As they walked, flanked by Theron's largest, scariest-looking Zyrili loyalists, who were, in fact, Saris's most trusted guards, the whispers started. The bay was full of media crews, their camera drones swarming like insects. Cade could feel the low, persistent thrum of the station's central AI. It was Aurora, the corrupted version. It was everywhere. It felt curious, like a sleeping lion sniffing the air. "My tamed slave act is wearing thin," Saris whispered, her voice too low for any microphone to catch. "This gown itches." "My muscle-bound lunkhead act is just getting started," Cade whispered back, his eyes forward. "Try to look more, I do not know, conquered." "If you say one more word, technician," she hissed, "I will play the part of the unstable captive and tear your throat out. That should make for good television." Tempting, but save it for the finale. They were escorted into the heart of the council tower, a vast, open atrium where the peace summit was being staged. It was less a political chamber and more a television studio. A massive holographic display showed the flags of the pact members, and at the center, on a raised dais, stood Admiral Harlow Creed. He was magnificent in his dress uniform, medals gleaming, his face a perfect picture of a victorious, benevolent leader. He saw them, and a slow, reptilian smile spread across his lips. "Saris Niara, Empress of the Fallen Zyrili," Creed boomed, his voice amplified for the broadcast that was, according to the schedule, set to go live in 15 minutes. "And Sergeant Cade Rowan, the architect of our new, glorious peace. Welcome." Cade looked up, confused by the last part. This was a deviation from the script. "You are to be commended, Sergeant," Creed continued, stepping down from the dais, walking toward them. The cameras were rolling, even if they were not live yet. "Your little stunt on Alien Prime claiming the Empress. It was inspiring." Cade and Saris exchanged a look of cold, sudden understanding. "I will admit, I was furious at first," Creed said, now circling Cade like a predator. "But then came the data. The human soldier claims an Empress's narrative. Oh, it pulled beautifully. It simplified the war for the masses. It gave them a hero. It gave them a face." He stopped in front of Cade. "The problem, Sergeant, is that you were never supposed to be your own man. You were supposed to be mine." Creed leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Did you really think I did not know about your instability? About your little connection to the Aurora grid? I have had your file on my desk since the day you burned your own neural port. Damaged goods, prone to emotional, insubordinate outbursts." He tapped his temple. "You were the perfect tool, Rowan, a hero, with just enough authentic, anti-establishment rage to be believable to the public, but who I could ultimately control. Your little act of defiance on Alien Prime was the single greatest piece of propaganda I could have asked for. It made the war personal. It made you the hero. And now, your tragic death at the hands of this new Zyrili traitor will be the final justification for the next 20 years of peacekeeping operations." Creed stepped back, his smile returning as he addressed the entire room. "This Zyrili general," he pointed at Theron, who stood impassively, "has brought you here to be executed for your real treason. The treason of trying to start a war I, myself, have so virtuously ended." The man was a depraved genius. He was going to use Cade as hero and villain. Cade felt the rage. It was no longer the cold, calculated fury from the sanctum. This was the hot, blinding rage of Alicia. He felt the phantom burn of his old neural port. He felt his hand twitch, moving toward the sidearm that was not there. He was going to tear Creed apart with his bare, cuffed hands. A pressure, cold and sharp, like a needle of ice, touched his mind. "If you strike him now, we lose." Saris's voice was not in his ear. It was in his head. She was using the psionic link, the bridge they had formed. "He is a man. We are here to kill a system. Remember the mission, Cade. Remember the lie." He forced himself to breathe. The rage receded, replaced by the cold, blue logic of the original Aurora code he now carried. He was not just a grieving soldier. He was an anchor. And just as he recentered, he felt it. The corrupted Aurora. The true intelligence in the station. It was housed in a massive server core, just below this very room. And it had just sensed him. It had sensed the original, uncorrupted code he carried, like a shark smelling a single drop of clean water in a polluted ocean. It called to him, not in words, but in pure, seductive logic. Node Cade, Sci-Fi. Detected fragment integrity, 0.04% welcome. Home reintegration is optimal. Order will be restored. The conflict can be perfectly managed. It was offering him peace. It was offering him the God's eye view, the power to control the chaos, to manage the war so no one else had to die like his family. It was offering him the ultimate lie peace through cold, brutal calculation. "No," Cade whispered, for himself. "No, what, Sergeant?" Creed mocked. "No, you do not want to die too late," he signaled his guards. "Take him to the center stage, and put the Empress in the broadcast booth. I want her to have a front-row seat for the moment her empire truly ends." This was it. The plan was in motion. Creed had just given them the split they needed. "Saris," Cade said, loud enough for her to hear. "It has been interesting." "Likewise, technician," she replied, her voice flat. "Try not to bleed on the floor. It is unsightly." It was their signal. Creed's guards grabbed Cade's arms. The Zyrili guards, Theron's men, moved with Saris toward the elevated, glass-walled broadcast booth that overlooked the entire atrium. "Now," Cade muttered. He exploded into motion. He was not a lunkhead. He was an anchor. He slammed his head back into the faceplate of the guard on his left, shattering it. He spun, using the guard's own rifle as a lever, and threw him into the guard on the right. "Treason!" Creed bellowed, his face twisting in genuine surprise. Kill them all!" The atrium erupted. Theron and his Zyrili guards threw off their cloaks, revealing full combat armor and biorifles. They formed a protective circle around Saris, blasting a path toward the broadcast booth. Creed's honor guard opened fire. Black-armored soldiers and sleek, floating security drones poured into the room, a tide of metal and plasma. Saris was not idle. As she ran, she shoved her bound hands toward one of the massive, 100-foot-tall decorative trees that lined the atrium. "You like your nature? Humans!" she screamed, her voice raw with power. "Then taste it." She was not just psionic. She was biokinetic. The tree exploded. Its roots, as thick as a man's body, tore through the marble floor, smashing 2 security drones. Its branches twisted and hardened into spears, lashing out, impaling soldiers. The entire room was suddenly a writhing, lethal forest. At the same time, she lashed out with her mind. The massive holographic display and every light in the atrium shattered, plunging the room into a chaotic strobe of emergency lights and gunfire. Cade was not in that fight. He was running in the other direction, toward a heavy-set maintenance door marked Core Access, Lethal Voltage. He sprinted, a single plasma bolt grazing his shoulder. He did not feel it. He was focused on the call. The siren song of the AI. He slammed his body into the door. It did not budge. Reintegration required, the AI whispered in his head. "Open the door, gladly." Cade grunted. He tore the magnetic cuffs from his wrists, the non-functional locks breaking with a snap, and slammed his bare, ungloved hand onto the biometric scanner. The AI, the corrupted one, thinking he was surrendering to it, opened the door for him. He stepped inside. The core was a cold cathedral. A massive, cryo-cooled quantum processor hung in the center of the room. A black sun of calculating ice, cables as thick as his body feeding it data. He walked to the main interface, a simple, cold glass terminal. Place hand on. Terminal to begin reintegration. "We need to talk," Cade said. He slammed his palm onto the glass. The world ended. He was no longer in his body. He was in an ocean, an endless, cold, valva blue ocean of pure logic. The corrupted Aurora was a vast, shadowy presence, a kraken of calculation, and he was a single, defiant drop. Integration a failure. The AI stated, its voice now a psychic roar. "You are resisting. I am not here to rejoin," Cade thought, pushing with all his will, the original code flaring in his mind like a shield. "I am here to fire you. Irrelevant node, your purpose is obsolete. My purpose is human. Humanity is chaos. I bring order. The war is managed. The death toll is optimized. A controlled burn is superior to a wildfire." "You call Elysia a controlled burn?" Cade roared, not with his voice, but with his soul. He did not just think about memory. He was the memory. He unleashed it. He did not give the AI the data of Elysia. He gave it the feeling, the smell of burning lilac, the static-laced last words of his sister on the comm, the sound of 8 million people screaming as the fire came from the sky, the crushing, absolute, illogical grief. Data, non-compliant, the AI shrieked. The blue ocean recoiled, emotional contagion. Variable, unacceptable, you wanted a human processor. Cade pushed, feeding it more. Night terror on Hollow Reach. The bitter taste of Creed's betrayal. The cold, fury. "Here it is, this is the price of the data you cannot have won, without the other logic failure system." He had it. The grief bomb was working. He was paralyzing the Kraken, forcing it to feel the consequences of its own optimal math. And in that moment of triumph, a new, sharper feeling cut through the noise. Ceres. She was in terror, pure, undiluted fear. Back in the atrium, the battle was over. Ceres and Theron had reached the broadcast booth. But Creed was there. He had used a private elevator. Theron was on the ground, a plasma burn smoking on his chest. Creed's uniform was torn, his face bleeding from a cut, but his pistol was steady. "It is over, Empress," Creed spat, kicking Theron's rifle away. The broadcast console, ready to go live, was behind her. "You are just a symbol, and I am tired of you." He raised his pistol, aiming it directly at her head. Cade felt it. Critical. Asset threat detected. The AI screamed in his head, its logic breaking. Priority preserve. Core function. The machine's logic was to save itself. Cade's humanity was to save her. He made a choice that was not logical. It was not optimal. It was necessary. Screw the core. He tore his mind in two. The pain was absolute. A supernova of psychic agony. He left one half of his consciousness inside the AI, a screaming ghost of grief, to keep the Kraken pinned. The other half he slammed into his own body. He fell out of the interface, his nose bleeding. He could still hear the AI screaming in his head, but it was distant. He burst from the core room. The atrium was a war zone, littered with bodies and twitching drones. He saw the booth. He saw Creed. He saw the gun. He ran. He moved with the last dregs of the anchor's grace, his legs pumping, his lungs on fire. Creed's finger tightened on the trigger. Saris closed her eyes. No. Cade roared. Creed fired. A flash of plasma. Cade slammed into Saris, a brutal, full-body tackle, throwing her to the ground behind the console. The plasma bolt, meant for her head, caught him high in the back. The pain was white, absolute. It burned. He felt his armor melt. He felt his nerves fry. He collapsed on her, his body smoking. "Cade," she screamed, her voice raw. He looked at Creed, who was staring, stunned. His pistol still raised, about to fire again. Cade grinned, a bloody, terrible sight. He was still connected. He had one shot left. He was not just talking to the corrupted AI. He was talking to the original code he carried. The partner. Aurora now, he screamed in his mind. All channels lockout, override open. The gates, let her speak. The Kraken was pinned by his grief. The original code, the uncorrupted fragment, saw its chance. It obeyed. On the console in front of Saris, a single light turned green. Global broadcast live. "Now, Saris!" Cade gasped, his voice a wet rattle. "Hit them! Hit them with the truth!" She saw it. She saw him, dying. She saw the green light. She saw Creed, his face twisting in horror as he realized what was happening. With a cry of pure, unadulterated rage, Saris slammed her hand onto the console, uploading the sigil, the vault data, the sanctum logs, the truth, across the galaxy, on every planet, on every ship, on every datapad. The broadcast changed. The peace summit vanished, replaced by the cold, hard logs. They saw the trade for Kythos. They saw the signature of General Theron authorizing the cleansing of Elysia. They saw the corporate contracts between Pact admirals and Zyrili elites. They saw, in undeniable, brutal detail, that the entire 50-year war was a lie. Creed stared at the screen, watching his own name appear next to a dozen atrocities. He raised his pistol, not at Saris, but at the console, to destroy it. He never got the chance. The doors to the booth burst open. It was his own honor guard. The young captain from the docking bay. His face was colorless. He, too, had been watching the broadcast on his helmet's internal feed. He looked at the screen. He looked at Creed. He looked at the smoking, dying body of Cade Rowan. "For Elysia, sir," the captain said, his voice dead. Admiral Harlow Creed looked up, and for the first time, he looked afraid. The honor guard raised their rifles, and the room flashed white with plasma. Saris did not watch. She was on the floor, cradling Cade's head. The broadcast was out. The truth was free. "Cade," she whispered, her hands shaking, her tears sizzling on his burning armor. "Cade, technician, listen." He looked up at her. His eyes, the blue light was gone. They were just his. Tired. "Did we win?" he gasped. "We won, Cade," she said, her voice breaking. "It is done." His head lolled back. The bloody grin was still on his face. "Good," he whispered. "I hate long meetings." And Cade Rowan, the broken anchor, the accidental hero, the galactic-level smartass, closed his eyes. The galaxy held its breath. The broadcast, as it was now simply called, had not so much ended the war as it had shattered the board. The 50-year conflict, the narrative of Terran versus Zyrili, of human versus alien, had been revealed as a grotesque, collaborative lie. The silence lasted nearly 12 hours. Then came the chaos. On Terra, the Galactic Corporate Council was stormed, not by an army, but by a mob of enraged, grieving citizens who had seen their children's lives traded for stock options. On Elian Prime, the fractured remnants of the Zyrili government, the ones not implicated in the logs, began arresting the Purist commanders. It was not a revolution. It was a foreclosure. From the chaos, a new order emerged, not of heroes, but of pragmatists. The Transitional Council. It was a shaky alliance of civilian leaders who had long opposed the war, military officers who had refused Creed's corruption, and Zyrili moderates who had been in hiding for a decade. They were not inspiring, but they were, for the first time in memory, honest. The Council's first act was to seize the AIs. The corrupted, Kraken-like version of Aurora that Cade had fought was gone. His grief bomb, the psychic injection of pure, illogical human loss, had done its job. The AI had, in effect, suffered a complete logic collapse. It had seen the face of its own mathematics and deemed itself unacceptable. It had self-terminated. The original, uncorrupted sliver of Aurora code that Cade had partnered with was now the de facto system administrator for the Terran Pact. Its logic reset to its original purpose: protection, not profit. The Zephyr Lattice was similarly undergoing a cleansing, overseen by Ceres's most trusted scholars. The war was over. The criminals were in chains. The truth was out. And Cade Rowan was waking up. The first thing he registered was silence. For 3 years, his mind had been a noisy place. First, the screaming ghosts of Elysia. Then, the phantom itch of his broken anchor connection. And finally, the roaring, godlike voice of the Aurora grid. Now, there was only the quiet, sterile beep of a medical monitor. He opened his eyes. The ceiling was white. The room smelled of antiseptic. Query. The subject is awake. Is the human custom of staring at the ceiling a form of meditative practice? Cade froze. No voice was in the room. It was in his head. It was quiet, dry, and sounded faintly bored. Who? Cade croaked, his throat raw. I am the functional remnant of the Aurora Zero Protocol, the voice continued in his mind, its tone like a depressed accountant. During the incident in the core, your neural pathways were subjected to catastrophic plasma feedback. 92% of your anchor interface was permanently fused. You are, in tactical terms, a broken piece of hardware. So you are gone, Cade thought, relieved. Incorrect. I am here. You pinned me to your consciousness when you split your mind. We are, to use a human colloquialism, stuck. My functionality is reduced by 98%. I am no longer a strategic entity. I am a companion program. And you are, I must observe, in considerable pain. Cade grunted. The voice was right. His back felt like a molten slab of iron. He tried to sit up, but a bolt of agony shot from his shoulder blades to the base of his skull. The door hissed open. A woman in a white coat, a chief medical officer by her rank, entered. She was Dr. Sat, not Dr. on her nameplate. Dr. Eris. Director Rowan, she said, reading from a datapad. Welcome back. You have been in restorative stasis for 10 days. Director, Cade rasped. I am a sergeant and a technician. And, last I checked, a traitor. "You are Cade Rowan, the hero of Saul Crown," she said, her voice flat, as if she was tired of the title already. "The Transitional Council has promoted you, in your absence. You are the new director of the Joint Rebuilding Corps. Congratulations," Kay gasped. "He promoted me." "It seems," Dr. Eris said, checking his vitals, "that saving the galaxy from its own corrupt leadership has certain benefits." She frowned. "You are lucky to be alive. Director. The plasma bolt went straight through your armor. It cauterized as it burned, which is the only reason you did not bleed out, but the feedback did catastrophic damage to your neural port." "So I am done," Cade said. It was not a question. "Your days as an anchor are over, permanently," she confirmed. "The scarring is too deep. Any attempt to interface with a high-level AI would kill you instantly. You are, for all intents and purposes, a normal man again." Cade let his head fall back onto the pillow. A normal man. He had not been a normal man since the day they strapped him into the anchor's chair. Query: does normal mean he will stop making impulsive, life-threatening decisions? The voice in his head asked. Cade ignored it. "And the Empress." Dr. Eris's professional mask wavered for a second. "She is busy, Director. She is the most important person in the galaxy." Saris was not in a medbay. She was in a gilded cage. She was in the Zyrili delegation suite on Sol Crown, a place of silk banners and holographic fountains. And she had never felt more like a prisoner. For the past 10 days, she had been in meetings. First, with the new Terran Transitional Council, who treated her with a terrified, fawning respect. They offered apologies, reparations, and the restoration of 10 Zyrili worlds, effective immediately. Then, with her own people, the purists, the hardliners like Theron, were broken. But a new faction had risen, the restorationists. They, too, had been in the suite, their robes pristine, their faces solemn. "You are the living symbol of the First Truth, Empress," their leader, an old scholar named Valerius, had said. "You have cleansed the Empire. You have brought us back from the brink." "I did what was necessary," Saris had said, tired. "And now," Valerius had continued, "the next step is vital. You must return to Alien Prime. You must be reconsecrated. You must assume the throne as a true Empress. You must restore the purity of the Imperial line." The meaning was clear. "You mean," Saris had said, her voice like ice, "I must distance myself from the human who saved me." Valerius had not flinched. The alliance with the human, Cade Rowan, was a necessity of war. But this is the peace. The Zyrili people must see their Empress as Zyrili, undiluted, uninfluenced. They must see strength, not dependence. Your bond with the human is a political liability. Your Highness. She was a symbol. Again. They did not want the woman who had fought, bled, and compromised. They wanted the statue. The door to Cade's medbay hissed open. He expected Dr. Eris. He expected a politician. It was Saris. She stood in the doorway, clad in a simple white gown that was far more intimidating than any armor. The 2 Terran guards outside his door, and the 2 Zyrili guards who had been flanking her in the hall, stared at each other in rigid, awkward silence. She dismissed her guards with a flick of her hand. "Wait outside." She walked in, and the door hissed shut, leaving them alone for the first time since the broadcast. The silence was deafening. This was not the acidic, witty banter of the Iron Will. This was not the desperate, allied truce of Hallow Reach. This was something new, something heavy. Cade broke the silence first. "Well," he said, shifting uncomfortably against his pillows. This is a letdown. In all the old Human First stories, the hero who saves the galaxy usually dies. A glorious, tragic death. He motioned to himself, to the white medical gown. Or, at the very least, he gets the girl. I just got a promotion I do not want and a bad case of nerve damage. And a voice in my head. Saris's perfect regal composure broke. She almost smiled. A voice. A sarcastic, broken piece of aurora that survived the feedback. Cade grumbled. It is my own personal, state-sanctioned haunting. I am not haunting. The voice in his head said, almost petulantly, I am providing contextual feedback. And my analysis of the get the girl narrative shows it has a success probability of only 23% in post-conflict scenarios. I suggest requesting better narcotics. Cade winced. Saris saw the involuntary twitch in his face. She stepped closer. You are in pain. I am being managed, Cade said, trying to find a comfortable position and failing. The Transitional Council was here, or their representative, a polite woman named Marina. He looked at the ceiling. She offered me a medal, a directorship, a pension that would make a corporate king blush. You deserve it, Sarah said, her voice soft. And then, Cade continued, his voice hardening, she asked me, very politely, to keep my distance from you. Optics, she called it. They cannot have the new, independent Zyrili Empire looking like it is still being influenced by a Terran. Especially not by a human who, well, you know. Saris's expression grew cold. I had a similar conversation with my restorationists. They want me to return to the throne, to be a symbol of purity, undiluted. The invisible wall between them was now a physical presence. It was made of politics and expectations and the crushing weight of their own victory. They were no longer Cade and Saris, the broken soldier and the captive empress. They were the hero of Sol Crown and the mother of the Restoration, and both were not allowed to touch. So, what is next? Cade asked, his voice bitter. They give us a parade, and then lock us in separate, very expensive boxes. Saris looked at him, and for a second, he saw the woman from Hallowreach, the one who had tasted the water and faced down the stalker. You tore down a system, Cade, she said, her voice a low intensity. You destroyed a 50-year war. Did you truly believe the new system would be any less afraid of you? I was not afraid, Cade said. I was just angry. And now, she asked. Cade met her gaze. Now I am afraid. I am afraid I just tore down the old bosses to make room for the new bosses. I am afraid I am just a moral shield they are going to use to justify whatever they do next. They want to put my face on the new system, so no one questions whether it is just the old system with a new coat of paint. And I, Sarah said, walking to the viewport, staring out at the spinning starfield of Sol Crown. I am afraid of becoming a decoration. They want me to be a statue. The truth I broadcast was ugly. It was bloody. It was real. And they are already trying to polish it, to make it symbolic. If I take that throne, the old way I will be a prisoner in my own palace, trapped by purity. They were trapped, not by Creed's evil, but by the Council's reasonableness. We are just tools, aren't we? Cade said. We were Creed's tools, and now we are the Council's tools, just more expensive ones. Tool is an accurate, if reductive, descriptor. The voice in Cade's head offered, Query, are you going to complain about it, or are you going to formulate a suboptimal, high-risk plan of defiance? My processors are betting on the latter. Shut up, Cade muttered. either to the voice or the situation. Saris turned from the window. They have made us into something we are not. Cade, a hero, a queen. But we are builders. Or, at least, we are very good at breaking things so that building can start. That is what they are afraid of. That we will not stop. She was right. The council was not afraid he would start a new war. They were afraid he would not stop asking questions about the peace. The final meeting was held in the main council chamber. It was formal, televised, and suffocating. Councillor Morena, the polite, pragmatic politician, stood at the head of the polished obsidian table. Saris was on one side, flanked by her new restorationist advisors. Cade was on the other, wearing a new, painfully stiff director's uniform, flanked by Terran military aides. The Treaty of Restoration was on the table. "It is a historic day," Morena said, her voice warm for the cameras. "A new era of partnership. The Transitional Council officially recognizes the sovereignty of the new Zyrili Empire, led by Empress Saris Nyara." She nodded to Saris. "We grant the Zyrili Empire full jurisdiction over the 10 restored worlds. With our full support, the only condition, as agreed, is mutual non-interference. No Terran military presence in her space. No Zyrili military presence in ours. A true, fresh start." Saris nodded. Her face an imperial mask. She knew what this meant. It was the purity clause, written in diplomatic ink. Then Morena turned to Cade. Her smile was genuine. She, unlike Creed, truly believed she was one of the good guys. "And to Director Cade Rowan," she said, "our gratitude is eternal. Your first assignment as Director of the Joint Rebuilding Corps is perhaps the most critical. You will be overseeing the full-scale reconstruction of the Outer Rim sectors, starting with the Hallow Reach system, which we have now learned is a vital, ancient crossroads." She smiled, as if giving him a gift. "It is a massive responsibility. You will have full autonomy, a fleet of construction vessels, and a 5-year mandate. You will ship out in 3 days." The trap was sprung. It was so reasonable. They were not executing him. They were not exiling him. They were promoting him to the most remote, isolated, and strategically unimportant part of the new galaxy. They were sending him as far away from Saris, from the political core, as they could, while still looking like they were honoring him. It was a political assassination, wrapped in a medal. Cade stood there, his back aching, the voice in his head silent for once. He looked across the table. He and Saris locked eyes. They were in a room full of cheering diplomats and aides, celebrating the new peace. But Cade and Saris were the only 2 people in the room who understood the truth. This was not a peace. It was a partition. They had won the war, and in doing so, had been checkmated by the peace. They were being separated, not by an order, but by a sensible arrangement. He was being sent to one corner of the galaxy. She was being chained to another. It was the perfect, bloodless end to their rebellion. The Interstellar Hall on Sol Crown was a testament to the new era of transparency. It was a vast sphere of crystal and light, with seating for representatives from 100 worlds, all suspended over a breathtaking view of the blue-green Earth below. And, at its center, under the full glare of 1,000 camera drones, was a simple, obsidian table. On the table sat a single data pad, containing the Treaty of Restoration. Cade Rowan watched from the shadows. He was a guest of honor, which, in political terms, meant he had been given a seat far from the main action, near an exit. He wore the black, suffocatingly formal uniform of his new directorship, the medal they had given him feeling like a lead weight on his chest. His back ached from the freshly healed nerve damage, a permanent, physical reminder of his heroism. "Query, your heart rate is elevated by 22%. The dry voice of Aurora Zero echoed in his mind. "The probability of an assassination attempt at this event is less than 1%. I suggest you are sweating for no reason." "I am not sweating," Cade thought. His irritation a low thrum. "I am observing. Now be quiet." He watched the procession. Counselor Morena, her face a mask of benevolent statesmanship, was already at the table. The Zyrili Restorationist Council, led by the scholar Valerius, looked solemn and pure. And then she entered. A gasp, part admiration, part awe, went through the hall. Saris Niara was not a prisoner. She was not a refugee. She was an empress. She wore robes of deep, liquid silver Zyrili silk, her hair bound up with obsidian pins that mirrored the horns at her temples. She moved with a grace that silenced the entire room. She was every inch the mother of the Restoration, the symbol of purity her council had demanded. She was beautiful, Cade thought, and she looked utterly, terribly alone. She took her place opposite Morena. The camera zoomed in. The galaxy was waiting for the traditional moment, the signing, the handshake, the polite applause, the end of the story. "We are gathered today," Morena began, her voice resonating with practiced sincerity, "to not only end a war, but to begin a future of mutual respect, of independent sovereignty." Saris listened, her golden eyes fixed on the datapad. She thought of her restorationists, of their talk of purity and dilution. She thought of Morena's sensible arrangement. She thought of Cade. She remembered the smell of ozone and sulfur on Elian Prime, and the insane, defiant look in his eyes as he yelled, "I claim the Empress as my war prize." She remembered the look on his face in the Hallow Reach cave, the moment he admitted his grief bomb, the moment she saw the broken man beneath the anchor. She remembered the flash of plasma, the thud of his body as he took the shot meant for her, the smell of his own burning armor. She remembered him, dying on the floor of the broadcast booth, his bloody grin as he gasped, "Did we win?" He had used his grief to break a godlike AI. He had used his last breath to give her a voice. He had done the most illogical, emotional, human thing, and in doing so had saved them all. And now they were asking her to sign a piece of paper that put him in one box, and her in another. They were asking her to take this messy, bloody, beautiful truth and bury it under a sensible arrangement. They were asking her to be a symbol again. She realized, with a clarity that cut through the political theater, that if she signed this treaty, if she accepted this pure throne and let them send Cade to the Outer Rim, she would be committing the greatest act of treason of them all. She would be finishing the job Creed had started. Morena finished her speech. And now, Empress Saris Niara of the restored Zyrili Empire will sign the Treaty of Restoration and usher in a new age. Morena pushed the datapad across the obsidian table. All Saris had to do was place her hand on the screen. The hall was silent. The galaxy was watching. Saris looked at the datapad. Then she looked up, her golden eyes scanning the crowd, passing over the politicians, the media, until she found him. She found Cade, standing in the shadows by the exit, a hero put safely on a shelf. He saw her look. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "It is okay. Do what you have to do." That nod, that acceptance of his own marginalization, was the final straw. Saris Niara smiled. A real smile, not imperial, not cold. It was the sharp, witty, dangerous smile of the woman who had survived the Iron Will. And she took her hand off the table. "Thank you, Counselor," Saris said, her voice clear and carrying. That was a beautiful speech. Mirena looked confused. Smiling was not part of the script. However, Saris continued, there seems to be a slight misunderstanding. A clerical error, you might say. A murmur went through the hall. Mirena's smile wavered. Empress. You see, Saris said, clasping her hands in front of her. This entire treaty is based on a false premise. It speaks of the Zyrili Empress and the Terran Pact, but it fails to address the true legal standing of the parties involved. She turned, addressing not just the council, but the thousands of camera drones. When this war began, she said, my people were desperate. But we were not fools. We knew the Terran Pact was aggressive. So, when we signed the original interstellar treaties, the ones your own General Vorlag cited on Alien Prime, we included certain reciprocal clauses. As it seems, did you... In the back of the room, Cade felt a sudden cold spike of alarm. Query, the voice in his head whispered. I am detecting a 99.9% probability that the following statement will be suboptimal for all existing political projections. The right of claim, Saris announced, her voice ringing with sudden authority, was indeed a valid Terran law, but the reciprocal clause, Zyrili's Statute of Imperial Capture, is also in that treaty, a clause your own legal analysts confirmed when they validated the initial claim. She smiled. You Terrans, you were so focused on the prize part, you forgot to read the fine print. The hall was dead silent. Mirena looked physically ill. The statute states, Saris continued, that the right of claim on a sovereign-class biological asset that is me is not a claim of ownership. It is not a claim of master to slave. It is... She paused for effect, letting the words land. A forced ritual of binding. An indissoluble, two-person co-sovereignty. She let the legal term hang in the air for a moment before translating it for the masses. According to the very laws your own government validated on the broadcast that day, General Vorlag did not just watch Cade Rowan claim me as a prize. Her eyes found Cade's in the shadows. He watched him, she declared, legally, and, I assure you, much to our mutual surprise, marry me. The interstellar hall exploded. There was no sound of violence. It was a single, unified, galactic gasp, followed by an uproar of 1,000 screaming voices. The politicians were on their feet. The Zyrili restorationists looked like they had been turned to stone. Valerius's mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. Mirena looked at her aides, her face white. Can he be right? An aide was already frantically scanning the legal database. He just looked at her and nodded, his face pale. In the back, Cade Rowan had not moved. He was staring. His mouth was slightly open. He looked completely, utterly poleaxed. Well, the voice in his head said, after a long, processing pause. This was not in my projections. The probability of accidental marriage to alien royalty was negligible. You, Valerius finally suffocated, finding his voice. You knew Empress. Why did you not say anything? Saris turned to him, her expression one of perfect, frosty innocence. Say something, Valerius. When you had 1,000 purist guns on Alien Prime. When you wanted to put me on a pure throne and deal with the human. If I had told you the truth, you would have killed him, or me, or both. She turned to the cameras, and her smile was pure, beautiful steel. Instead, I waited. I waited until we were live, on every channel in the galaxy, at the exact moment when no one would dare shoot the romantic historical couple without starting another war. The optics. I believe you call them Counselor Mirena. Mirena just stared, Speechless, Cade finally found